Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to the Holistic Academy, the podcast where we weave together ancient wisdom and cutting edge science to understand how to live well in this complicated world. I'm one of your hosts, Amy, and I'm here with holistic coach and scientist David.
Hi, Amy. I'm David, your resident, science geek, and running on caffeine and curiosity. So to talk about this amazing topic.
Brilliant. Welcome back. Today we're diving into this fascinating idea that's been around for thousands of years, the connection between our gut and our mind. Long before we had microscopes, genetics, or neuroscience, ancient traditions from Ayurvedic medicine in India to Taoist writings in China recognized that digestion and our mood were inseparable. They understood that what we eat, how we digest it, and the balance of our inner systems directly shaped the energy we have, our clarity in our minds, and even our emotional states. So I guess that might be where the phrase comes from, you are what you eat.
I love that idea, and I also can relate a lot to these kind of concepts about the microbiome on the intestinal world that we have inside of us, with viruses, with bacteria, with all that universe. This is a fun fact. We have more bacterial genes than human genes, so we are more bacteria than human. That's something to talk about. And it's remarkable to see how modern science is catching up with this world. We know now that our gut really does talk to our brain. And I think we can understand, everyone can understand this just by thinking about a good meal and a really lousy meal. And that falls into your stomach, and you start feeling these cramps and these stomach aches. So whenever we eat something and it doesn't, it's not good digestion, we immediately feel in our mood, as you were talking, and also there are plenty of chemicals, nerves, and immune signals that we are triggering with this mechanism. And today we are going to explore that conversation, how our ancient teachers got it right, and what we have discovered in the lab to explain it.
Amazing, David. Yes. So let's first reveal what happened with our ancient teachers. The ancient world, ancient knowledge and history, and ancient traditions, they all learned a lot about the gut health themselves, and said it definitely has a connection to our mood and overall health. In Ayurvedic medicine found in India about 5,000 years ago, they had this central concept called Agni, the digestive fire. So if you had proper digestion, then you were meant to have proper physical, mental, and emotional balance. However, if you had poor digestion, weak Agni or toxins, known as Amma, with these building up, then they suggested that related to having fatigue, being irritable, being anxious, and often feeling depressed. So back then in Ayurveda medicine, herbs, diet, and daily routines were prescribed not just for physical health, but also mental clarity and emotional balance.
That's incredible. And even when I eat, well, I notice such a shift in my mood, mostly when what I eat it's well tolerated by my stomach.
Absolutely, I agree. I'm really affected my mood about what I eat, especially if I have frozen foods for a week, then I definitely don't feel so good. And moving over more to China, about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, in Taoist writings, they viewed the body as this interconnected system of organs and energy flows known as qi. The stomach and spleen were considered central to energy, vitality, and our emotional regulation. And emotions like worry, overthinking, they were believed to directly affect digestion and vice versa. So imagine in this modern day if we're only overthinking because we haven't been given our body enough time to rest and digest. And is it us thinking or is it our microbiome? Like you said, David, lots of little bacteria. So back in Chinese medicine, they prescribed practices like mindful eating, also herbal tonics, and qigong, a movement practice, which was used to maintain gut and mind harmony.
Mm. Well, they all knew it long before we are knowing it now. What did the Greeks say? Because I am always interested in how this Greek culture started to discover a lot of things before any other culture.
Well, also the Greeks were also very curious about our health and well-being, and we often discuss about one of those first physicians, Hippocrates, and he says all disease begins in the gut. And
Mm,
he also emphasized the balance of humors, four different liquids in our body, where the digestion would affect our mood and temperament. So the key takeaways from this is that our ancient teachers consistently recognize that the gut health and our mental and emotional health are deeply linked long before our microbes and neurotransmitters were discovered. So their advice on diet and eating herbs and lifestyle was aimed at keeping the whole system in balance, not just treating isolated systems. And it's a shame because in modern day, I feel like we've lost a lot of our herb knowledge and knowing what type of herbs our body needs at different times in the year, or what types of herbs our body needs because we're lacking certain amino acids needing to create proteins in our bodies and things like that. So it's amazing that there is some knowledge that we rediscover, but I also feel like there's a lot of knowledge that is lost. So that's why I love this podcast so much, because we're bringing back a lot of that lost knowledge and those lost ideas so that we too can live our best lives.
yeah, I couldn't agree more about the this kind of knowledge because I think we are too distracted today and very busy to think about these simple things, but that are so important to alleviate our health and to give us a much better experience. And we focus on other things instead of the main ones. So the story of the gut and brain connection boosting your mood and mind is all starting to unravel. Speaking of which, Amy, the scientific research are catching up now and talking all about the vagus nerve. And it's not just a nerve, it's like a bidirectional superhighway. And they are basically confirming that the gut is talking directly to the brainstem, that it's the second brain idea. And this gut brain connection is huge because it is so strong that it makes me wonder how much of my thinking is influenced by these microbes and the neurotransmitters that they produce, and how they are becoming now a more important brain than the mind.
Oh, it's really fascinating, and me too. I think these studies are great to read, but it might not just be that we've lost control of our thoughts. It's the fact that we isn't just us as a human cell and a brain. We're sharing the driver's seat with a huge community of microbes that influence how our mind and body function.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. And I'm suddenly imagining a bunch of tiny tenants in my gut helping make daily decisions.
Yeah, that's true, David, in a way, yes. We must imagine and remind ourselves that we're not just a single organism, we're ecosystems, what some scientists call a supra-organism. So when you say the gut is talking, it's not just the gut tissue. And you're right, it could be partly the gut influencing your daily thoughts. There are trillions of microbial residents inside your microbiome, and each perhaps are contributing to this conversation today.
Yes, this microbiota, the bugs, and this is a community of living microbes, bacteria, fungi, archaea, even viruses. Although we think that viruses are not good for us, well, we have a lot of viruses inside. And the microbiome is all their genetic material. And that's the powerhouse. Our human genome gives us around 20,000 protein coding genes, and the microbiome gives us, wait for it, hundreds of times more. As I was saying, we are more bacteria than human. It's like discovering your computer had another hidden operating system all along. And I think that nowadays we are entering into that stage in this computer science because with AI, it's going to replace these operating systems, and now AI is going to powerhouse most of the things that we are doing online.
True that, but is it a healthy microbiome, the AI, or an unhealthy one? Is it causing our thoughts to elevate, or maybe to keep us limited and disempowered? But that's pretty amazing, David. Hundreds of times this whole time, people are thinking that the 20,000 human genes are the marvelous machinery inside of us, whereas it's the gut of microbes that are laughing with their millions and millions of marvelous genes. And that's really interesting because you and I, we both studied biochemistry and we really focus on a lot of the human cells and the proteins that they make and not much of the gut and the microbiome and the microbes down there. So I think my microbiology, that might be the right kind of field to look into, but it's quite an interesting place to see because perhaps these are influencing our daily thoughts and our daily actions more than we realize. So the more knowledge we learn about it, knowledge is power. And this knowledge is still only quite recent because a long time ago, scientists even called the microbiome the forgotten organ. It's not that we didn't ignore it, as we had talked before about the gut brain connection in ancient history, but the tools to measure it weren't good enough. So, the story of how a microbiome was discovered, how this hidden world was found out, is really wild.
Well, I've just have some cups of coffee, so I'm ready. Hit me with the history lesson.
Well, picture this in 1680s, the Dutch Golden Age, a textile merchant named Antoine van Leeuwenhoek invents the microscope. Not because he's a scientist, in fact, but because he wants to examine cloth quality. But once he builds it, he turns the lens in on everything, including himself.
No, don't say it. I remember a lot that name because when I was in high school, I read a very small book about these discoveries that he made with the first microbes that he was testing, and it's just amazing. So keep going.
Oh, yeah, so he was one of the first inventors of this microscope, and in 1681, he examines his own stool, his poop, Then he looks at his dental plaque. Then he looks under his handmade lenses and sees what he calls animalcules. They sound really cute, don't they? Animalcules, but they were tiny living creatures dancing around under the microscopic lens.
So he was basically the first ever self biohacker.
Exactly, he was. But then science took another shift and swung towards germ theory with Pasteur and Koch, the great microbe hunters who focused on pathogens, where microbes became villains. So there was only one person in this time who saw microbes as from a more positive perspective, a more holistic perspective, and his name is Elie Metchnikoff, a Russian immunologist in Paris around 1908.
These names are so complicated. So, well, Metchnikoff, the Nobel Prize for discovering phagocytosis and establishing the cellular theory of immunity.
Yes, he's quite a cool guy. He did indeed. And he also believed that our aging was accelerated by this idea of intestinal putrefaction.
Mm. That's intestinal putrefaction, an old scientific term used especially in the late 1800s and 1900s that refers to the breakdown or rotting of proteins in the gut by certain bacteria producing toxic byproducts. And these were thought to poison the body from the inside.
Exactly, yes. However, Metchnikoff didn't think all microbes in the gut were bad. Indeed, he did believe that putrefactive bacteria, those breaking down proteins and producing toxins, contributed to aging, as you mentioned. However, he noticed that people in certain Eastern European villages lived long lives and they ate or drank tons of fermented milk.
Mm.
His idea then switched to the idea that there were beneficial bacteria, like the lactic acid producing ones found in sour milk and yogurt. And he believed that these beneficial bacteria could suppress the harmful ones. So he shifted his own diet and started drinking sour milk daily. And he said he was essentially seeding his gut with good microbes to outcompete the harmful aging promoting microbes. And that's the root of our modern idea of probiotics.
It's just amazing how they have such a capacity to observe what was happening in their bodies and to sense how they react to certain foods, to also compare to other cultures and to distinguish what were their feeding patterns of that kind of culture. So those are the things that I think we are lacking now, this kind of observation power to distinguish what make us good and to distinguish what make us bad. So that's amazing. A century ahead of his time, but limited by the tech.
Exactly. There was some blockages back then, and the problem was that most bacteria die in oxygen, so no one could really grow them.
Mm. So let's shift now forward towards the 1970s. Carl Huss uses 16S RNA to identify microbes without culturing them. And then Joe Handelsman coins metagenomics in the 1990s, sequencing everything in a sample. Suddenly, an invisible universe becomes visible.
Absolutely. And then I guess that leads to the Human Microbiome Project in 2007.
Hmm.
It basically as you mentioned, David, is the equivalent of our moon landing into our inner cosmos. It was a big revelation looking at all these microbes. People all have different species of microbes, but in fact, many perform very similar functions. So we want to make sure we focus on function, as that's what matters more than its taxonomy.
Yeah, so now we are going to start unraveling this gut brain energy story. So, what happens with this energy? And let's talk about the functions of the microbes doing inside of our gut. So think of them as your external metabolic organ. Humans can't digest complex plant fibers, but microbes can. So they ferment them into short chain fatty acids, which are a very important part of the energy system, like acetate, propionate, and butyrate.
Oh, yes, exactly. And we give them space and food. Well, we give the microbes space and food, and they give us these health supporting molecules.
Exactly. And butyrate, especially, is like the premium fuel for the cells lining in your colon. And it strengthens that gut barrier, those tight junctions, and helps to avoid this leaky gut and these diseases that we are having now. When those junctions weaken, well,
Yes, you mentioned it. We do get a leaky gut.
yeah. So that's right. And then these microbial components slip into the bloodstream and the immune system freaks out. Chronic low grade inflammation, and that inflammation messes with insulin signaling, and suddenly metabolic disorders look less like bad choices and more like a disturbed ecosystem.
Precisely. So when that gut ecosystem falls out of balance, those metabolic disorders you mentioned, we start to see things we used to blame on willpower, but we're talking more about type 2 diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, and even fatty liver disease. So these now are proven to not just be lifestyle slip ups, but they're actual signals and signs to doctors and to our own and to us as a person that our body's energy regulation system, including the microbes, the hormones, and the immune signals, are not working in the way it should. And as we mentioned in the beginning, it influences your mood and your mind. And that connection is also really, really interesting.
So we are entering into this mind connection with our mood. And this is, I think, where it gets really cool that your gut and your brain are in constant conversation, just
Is that
like
through
a
the
couple.
is there conversation through the vagus nerve that we mentioned at the beginning?
Yeah, that's one pathway. But there are three, and each one paints a different part of the picture. So the first one is the neural pathway, which is this vagus nerve. And think of it as literal a phone line running between your gut and your brain. So your microbes produce all kinds of chemical messengers, metabolites, that activate receptors in your gut. And those signals get sent straight up the vagus nerve to your brainstem. And it's your gut saying, hey, here is how things are going down here in real time. The second mechanism is the hormonal pathway, which is the HPA axis, which is your stress response system between the hypothalamus deep in your brain, and the pituitary gland right below it, and the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. So this is really wild because it merges a lot of connections between these, let's say, one system, but three sub layers that we have. And when scientists raise mice without any microbes, the so-called germ-free mice, those mice respond to stress like the world is ending. So their stress hormones skyrocket. But as soon as you introduce normal gut microbes, their stress response settle back to normal. And in other words, these microbes help calm your stress system and prevent it from overreacting. So they function as a buffer system. And third, the immune pathway. So if the gut lining becomes leaky, as we spoke, bits of bacterial components can slip into the bloodstream and trigger inflammation. And that inflammation doesn't just stay, sorry, in the body. It can reach the brain or signal to it. So when the brain's own immune cells, the microglia, get activated chronically, you end up with things like brain fog, low mood, and slower thinking. And I think that this is the one that many people now have because they are getting slower and slower.
It's true, we are. So it could be a combination of a few things, but definitely our gut health and maybe how our use of technology and how much we're playing on the phones, it can't always be helping our brain focus. But that's some great knowledge, David. Thanks for sharing that. So those three pathways, the neural, hormonal, and immune pathways, are all different ways our gut health can shape how we feel, how we think, and even how we handle stress. Therefore, depression might at least partly be a inflammatory condition beginning in the gut. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's what many researchers are exploring right now. And depressed individuals often have fewer small chain fatty acids producing microbes. So these, like butyrate, for example, this molecule that we spoke about, these tiny molecules are your good gut bacteria, and they make when they ferment fiber.
Exactly, yeah. So those are the molecules we've been talking about, which are really important to calm inflammation in our body. They also help, in fact, to strengthen the gut lining and help regulate our immune system. And they also then support a healthy communication between the gut and the brain. So I guess for us, if we're not eating well, we're going to lose those short chain fatty acid producing microbes, and therefore we'll lose a major source of our anti-inflammatory mood supporting chemistry.
Mhm. Yeah, and these depressed individuals show they contain more pro-inflammatory bacteria in the gut, as in the fact that over 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. So we used to think that this serotonin was mostly produced on the brain, and we now know that more than 90 is. So the brain is not producing much, and certain microbes promote its synthesis, and you begin to see the picture.
Totally. Yeah, I always remember that an exciting fact learning that 90% of serotonin is in fact produced in the gut and not your brain. And I think that does make sense since serotonin is often called the happiness hormone for its role in mood regulation. So, having a good level of serotonin is really important as it also can help regulate your sleep, your appetite, digestion, and even your pain perception.
Yeah. So certain microbes, especially those that make these SCFAs or short chain fatty acids, actually signal your gut cells to produce more serotonin.
Wow, our bodies are amazing. That's really cool stuff. So, what about the microbiome and GABA, one of those other important neurotransmitters in the brain? I think GABA is thought to be the brain's main brake pedal, so it can slow down nerve activity when you feel stressed, and that can help you feel more calm, relaxed, and less anxious.
Yeah, this is another very interesting neurotransmitter that nowadays we know that is extremely important in regulating this immediate response to stress. And now we also know that some lactobacillus and bifidobacterium strains, those are the names of the strains that you should look for in the probiotics if you want to buy some. And in the gut, they make it directly. They are like these tiny chemical factories that are going to produce these amazing neurotransmitters.
They have such fancy names for producing the GABA transmitter, but anyway, it's always fun to look at the species and the different types that produce different neurotransmitters too. I'm sure our microbiome, since there are millions and trillions of them, there's probably many other hormones that they create to help us stay in balance and keep us regulated. But I can really understand that no wonder when I feel stressed, it also affects my stomach, and also my stomach affects my stress. So that's also been a loop in my life. And I guess it's been a really old loop that have been across times for humans, as we did see in ancient traditions, from Ayurvedic medicine to Taoist writings. They still talk about the digestion and mood as being inseparable. And as we said, modern science is catching up to what healers have been saying for 3,000 years. So, David, let's make a connection as well between the microbiome and our sleep patterns.
Well, this topic is just amazing, and we talked in a previous episode that regulating your body and your sleep cycles was aligning to your circadian rhythm, and we spoke about it deeply, and also how you have to be more attuned and aware of these schedules in your life and your body's own internal 24-hour clock. In fact, your microbes help regulate these circadian rhythms, these clocks, and influence the conversion of dietary tryptophan into serotonin and then into melatonin. So people may experience dysbiosis, which means disrupted sleep chemistry, which is an imbalance of the microbial communities in the body.
Okay, well, this is the part where I admit my defeat. My inner ecosystem is an absolute mess. I don't think I eat a well-rounded, healthy diet. But I think we need to discuss, how do we fix this? How do we fix our mood and our microbiome and the story of our gut? How do we garden it and restore this healthy inner cosmos to create a happy mood for us as people?
I love that analogy of the garden because it is exactly that. And we need just two steps. First one is feed your good microbes with prebiotics, which can be diverse plant fibers, garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, Jerusalem artichokes, whole grains, beans, and they will boost your CFA production, which are the fuel for a calmer gut and a clearer mind. And second, seed your gut with probiotics. These are fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, and kombucha. So, a Stanford study found that these fermented foods significantly increase this microbial diversity and lower inflammation across the board.
Wow, that's really interesting. So thanks for that advice. I now know what foods I need to eat. And actually, I have quite a cool fact, I think, about some prebiotic foods. I had read that yellow and orange colored fruit foods, such as oranges, lemons, mangoes, or yellow bell peppers, may reduce depression. And some research suggests that they support gut microbes that influence our mood. There was one study that gave young adults orange juice for 8 weeks, and their gut bacteria shifted towards more friendly families, and their mood highly improved. And another long term study also linked higher citrus intake to a lower risk of depression, too. So I guess whilst a single orange won't cure the blues, the colours on your plate may literally help you shape the chemistry in your gut and your mind. So next time you're looking for some fruits or vegetables, maybe pick out a yellow one.
And this is just in time for the season where maybe we have a lower serotonin level due to this climate and this lack of daylight. So this is perfect advice so that you can apply it in winter and start having more yellow and orange foods, which are citrus also that helps to vitamin C, and it will help to fight any kind of cold or influenza virus, which is the season. So these bell peppers are awesome for your gut microbes and mood. But here is the thing, they are just one color in the spectrum. Enter this rainbow diet, which are red tomatoes, green spinach, purple berries, blueberries, orange carrots, and yellow peppers. So each color represents different phytonutrients and fibers which feed different microbial communities in your gut. And the more colors you eat, the more diverse your ecosystem becomes. And diversity is the key for mood regulation, immunity, and even metabolism.
Oh, that's interesting. So the best diet for my brain will be the rainbow diet. And that's a great way to start healing my own gut. And I promise I'll combine those prebiotics with some probiotics, maybe looking for some yummy strawberry yogurts. I'm not sure about sauerkraut, maybe I'll try it, but I do like kimchi, so I can add it into my diet. But David, before we go, I really want to talk about this crazy experiment. I've seriously heard of a poo transplant as a method to heal your microbiome. Should I elaborate or will you explain?
Well, this is just the part that maybe some people won't have so much uh, pleasant thoughts about it. But let's start mentioning these poo transplants, or scientifically known as fecal microbiota transplantation, which is abbreviated FMT, taking out microbes, gut microbes, from a healthy donor and introducing them into someone with a disrupted microbiome. And actually, I saw a documentary about this with a guy that was experimenting this lifestyle with a tribe in Africa, and he performed this fecal transplant with people, and he also adapted his body to the diet of this tribe just for more or less 15 days. And when he returned to his homeland in Australia, then he measured his poop, and the microbes that he had compared to the ones that he had before he went to the change of lifestyle of eating behaviors, and he amazingly saw a big change in the microbes that he had. So just with 2 weeks of changing your diet or introducing this rainbow diet that we were talking, you can do this magic.
What a fascinating and interesting and crazy documentary you were watching, David. But yes, so they're putting in that poo, or scientists and doctors might call it a stool. That poo of amazing, rich, healthy, vibrant, dancing microbes, and putting it into a patient that isn't so healthy in their gut. And that seems to, as you say, change their mood, but also help regulate inflammation and help that gut barrier stay strong. So it is becoming a more common medicine kind of operation. So look out for it. And how it's done is a bit weird, but it's introduced in the patient's gut, usually via colonoscopy with an enema, or could be done with some capsules. And then once there, the healthy microbes start to recolonize in the new patient's gut, which, as we learnt before, can outcompete with the harmful bacteria and help restore the balance.
That sounds like the restoring of the balance with the Force of Star Wars. So maybe we can picture that instead of these fecal transplants. So certainly, and this will then restore these gut brain signals. So, as these new microbes, or let's say this new army, establish themselves, they start producing these short chain fatty acids, vitamins, neurotransmitter precursors, and these molecules can reduce gut inflammation, can strengthen the gut lining, and can influence the vagus nerve and other gut brain pathways.
So that's all for the poo transplant, but thanks, David. It's also been called a gut ecosystem reset, and I wonder if you would try it, as it has been known to have a ripple effect on digestion, immunity, and even mood.
Well, I don't know if I'm ready for that, but let's see what happens in a few years. Maybe I will try it. So the truth is that mostly is used for a stubborn gut infection, but it seems quite a revolutionary idea to swap out your unhappy feces for someone with happier feces to have a happy life. So that sounds so really fun.
Well, it might be fun, David, for you, but for me, science just keeps getting stranger and stranger. But that is a great experiment that demonstrates how powerful our microbiome truly is. And then we've been talking quite a bit about our mood, but we have also mentioned about our brain function. There is still growing evidence that a bad or dysbiotic microbiome can also negatively affect our brain functioning, our overthinking, our anxiety, our depression. So a study that was titled Relationships Between Diet-Related Changes in the Gut Microbiota and Cognitive Flexibility was taken in Oregon State University in the USA in 2015. And these scientists conducted experiments on mice with a healthy diet and a Western style diet, which were fed sort of fast food diet on high fat and high sugar. So I love this experiment because the results of the two groups of mice are really interesting. The results showed, though, that the mice on a healthy diet acted like Olympic athletes. They dived into the water, completing a zigzag confidently and hitting platforms in water like pros, whereas the Western diet mouse were asked to do the same task, and basically they were like me on a Monday morning with no coffee. They splash around, forget where they're going, keep circling in the same spot, and take a long time to find the platform in the water or just completing the task. Total chaos. So those mice show that their brains aren't working because their good gut microbes are on strike.
That remind me a lot of people that I know that sometimes they are really uh, stubborn to do exercise, and probably that explains about their diet. No, so this is just really interesting stuff. How this microbiome affects both the mood and the brain functioning. And today we have discussed several ways of improving our microbiome, sorry, to live happy, healthy, clearly, and holistically.
Yeah, it's been a great, juicy, and exciting episode, David. So, just as we're near the end, would you mind summarizing the best five top tips for living holistically with your microbiome?
Of course, it would be my pleasure. And let's remind our listeners that some of these key takeaways they can be implemented in their daily lives. They are not complicated. And as we mentioned, if you want to have a quicker, faster, and more focused brain, just pay attention to these tips. So feed your good microbes with prebiotics. Eat diverse plant fibers, garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, beans. Seed your gut with probiotics. Eat fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, and kombucha. Create a rainbow diet, that's number three, to feed different microbial communities in your gut and diversify your gut ecosystem. Four, avoid fast food and avoid Western diets. So high fat or high sugars, try to, as much as possible, avoid them. You can have a treat one day, probably, but most of the days, subject yourself to this healthier lifestyle. And perhaps the least popular tip, which no one I think is ready, probably get a fecal microbiota transplantation. So if you want the pill now, this pill is going to be hurtful.
Oh, wow. Well, maybe in the future there will be a time when we're all swapping our poos and seeing how each other feel and potentially reading their minds. But those are some super great tips. Thanks, David. So today's podcast has spoken all about that, the importance of our microbiome, from Lou Van Hock's animalcules, the little dancing microbes he found under the microscope, to Metchnikov's yogurt obsession, where he saw Eastern Europeans live a lot longer lives on fermented milk, to Woese decoding the microbial universe inside of us, to the fecal microbiota transplant, and mice whose brains don't function on fast food. This entire journey leads us to something so simple and ancient, just as eating well and focusing on including different foods in our diet, including those fermented foods and fiber. So it's been another amazing, perfect marriage of the past and present. Here is where the ancient wisdom meets the cutting edge modern science, showing the importance between our gut and our mind and how we can boost our mood and also our functioning. So it's important to have this with holistic living, which can be grounded both deeply in tradition and in the modern science.
Mhm. And I think that this is something that we have been proven every time that we are going back into these ancient cultures and in each episode. So,
Amazing. Yes. So that's it for today's episode of the Holistic Academy. Nurture your guts and your mood. focus, and overall brain health will follow. Just to let you know about next week's episode, it will be all about sharing vulnerability, journeys into the heart of what we hide. And I'm really excited for this episode as we're about to dive even deeper into what it really means to open up, exploring personal stories of fear, courage, and the unexpected strength that comes from showing our true selves. You might hear experiences that will challenge the way you think about vulnerability. You might find golden nuggets of wisdom and witness moments that are raw and real. You may even hear some insights that could inspire you to embrace your own cracks and imperfections. So please join us next week as we discover who we are, what vulnerability is, and journey into the heart of what we hide so that we can discover the power that comes from truly being seen.
That sounds like a challenging and very amazing episode that will, let's say, take out the layers that many of us use to protect ourselves and to sometimes use a mask to disguise who we are. So please post comments, everyone. Give us your take on this episode. And also, if you want to suggest any kind of topic, please post it in the comments. Share the episode, subscribe to our channels, and if you have some time, please give us a rating in Spotify, in Apple Podcasts, because that will help us for the algorithms so that we can be seen. Follow
Yeah.
us also on Facebook.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. Yes, please share and like and rate us so we can share this knowledge far and wide. If you like the episode today, then also please share it with a friend who might find it interesting, who may like to find a quick hack into a happier life by eating better and eating well. And until then, take care, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.